Okay, the first page we're going to implement here is going to be the products page. And the main purpose of this page, as I specified before, is going to be to display all of the products that are available on our site. So let's open up the products page here. And what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to add HTML elements to this page in order to obviously display all of our products. So the first thing that we're going to want to do here is remove this H1 products page heading, or rather just remove the text inside of it. And we're going to change that so that it just says products, right? We no longer care what page it is. We'll be able to see that just by the HTML structure inside of it. And now that we've done that, we're going to add a div underneath that. And this div is going to have the class of gridwrap. That's just for styling purposes, as are most of the classes we're going to add to our components here. So we'll add the class gridwrap. And inside here is where we're going to have the list of all of our products. Now, in order to display a list in Vue based on a JavaScript array, what we're going to need to do is use something called the v-for directive. And what that looks like, I guess I'll just show you here. We just need to add that to an HTML element. So if we want each of our products to be surrounded by a div, we would just say div. And then as one of the attributes for this div, we're going to add the v-for directive, which looks like this. It's v-for. And then as the value for that, we're going to say product in products. So basically what this is going to do is for each product inside the products array, which we'll need to add to our export default object down at the bottom here, we're going to repeat this div as well as anything that's inside of it. Alright. So this allows us to take a simple array of JavaScript data and display some sort of HTML structure for each element it contains. So inside this div, now what we're going to do is we're going to display the product image. So we'll say image. And then what we're going to need to do is add the source attribute, which is going to be the image name property for each product. And by the way, before we do this, let's actually add our images to this page. So what we're going to need to do is import the temp data file, right? Import this products array that's exported from the temp data file, and add that as a property to our products page. So what that's going to look like, we're going to say import products from, and then we're going to reference the temp data file by saying /tempdata. And now that we have the products, we're just going to add a data method to our component. This is where we can specify data that our component is able to access and modify. And we're going to return an object containing the products array. And this will allow us to reference products up here inside our template. Cool, so now that we have our products added, we're going to loop through each of those products. And as I said, we're going to need to add the image attribute, and we're going to need to put a colon in front of that since we're going to be referencing the value of a JavaScript variable instead of specifying a concrete string value here. So we're going to say product.imageName. Alright. So that's each of our images, and we can actually just close off the tag with a slash and a greater than sign like so. And then under that we're going to add an h3 heading that will contain the product's name, and we'll actually have to give this a class as well for styling purposes. We'll say class equals product name. And inside that we're going to say double curly braces, product.name. That's how we insert the value of this name property from the product into this part of the HTML. And then for the paragraph tag we're going to have the product's price. So we'll say paragraph class equals product price. And then we're going to insert the product price into there with double curly braces, and we'll say product.price. And let me remove that extra little double quote that I added by accident. And that should be all we need for our product. Now one last thing we're going to do is add a button here that will allow us to go to the product detail page for a given product. So what that's going to look like is we'll just say button, and then we'll have that button say view details. Cool. So that's all we need to add for the internals of this product div. One more thing that we're going to need to do though is add a few more attributes to this div. Again, this is going to be mostly for styling purposes, but also we're going to need to add a key that will make it easier for Vue to re-render our products whenever they change. So don't worry about that little detail right now. For now, just know that we need to add a class attribute, which is for styling of product item. And then underneath this v for directive, we're going to add a key. And for that we're going to use the product's ID property, right? So we're going to say, key, product.id. And that is just a unique identifier that Vue uses behind the scenes to keep track of the divs. Cool, so that just about completes our products page. But one more thing that we're going to want to do is open up our app.vue file and remove some of the default styles that the Vue CLI gave us from before. So we can actually just remove this entire style tag. And then instead of having this h1 tag inside our template, we're instead going to just add a heading for our site. And we're going to call our site 2 Trees Olive Oil, right? That's our brand name here. You can feel free to use whatever brand name you want to use for your own site. And then around the router view, what we're going to want to do is have a div with the class of PageWrap. There we go. And that, again, is just for styling purposes. And we'll put the router view inside of there. And one thing to notice is that this allows us to apply this same page wrap styling to all of the pages in our site without us having to add the same div to each of our page components. Cool. So now that we've done all of that, we should be able to take a look at our products page and see if there's any other tweaks we need to make. So what we're going to want to do is go to the products page by adding just /products after our URL. And sure enough, we see all of the products displayed on our site. So anyway, that is how to create a basic products page for our site. The next thing that we're going to take a look at is how to create a product detail page. Now that we have the products page for displaying all of the products on our site, the next page we're going to implement here will be the product detail page. So this page is going to be for displaying more in-depth details about a specific product. And it's going to come up whenever the user clicks on this View Details button for a specific product. Now, instead of having to create a specific page for each product on our site, what we're going to do is use this single product detail page component. And we're just going to insert different data into this page based on which product we want to look at. Now, all of this is done by using this URL parameter thing that we added to our product detail page path inside our main.js file. So if you've ever found yourself wanting to be able to use a single component to display multiple pages, right? So if you have a blog site, let's say, and you want to use a single article component to display all of the articles for your site, this would be how you would do that, right? You would use a URL parameter like we're doing here, and then we're going to use the value of that part of the URL to select a product that we want to display on the page. So that might sound a little bit confusing. Let me just show you what that's going to look like. The first thing that we're going to want to do on our product detail page component is import all of the products from our temp data file. So we'll say import products from /tempdata. And then down inside here we're going to say data. And this is going to be the data method. And what we're going to want to do is return the product that we want to display. So unlike in the products page where we just made all of the products available to the template up above because we wanted to loop through, display all of them. In the product detail page we only want to display a single product. So we're going to need to use a little bit of JavaScript logic to find the correct product from our products array up here and display that in our template. So here's what this is going to look like. We're going to say product, and then products.find. Now the find method in JavaScript, in case you haven't worked with it before, is just a method that allows us to find a certain item in an array that matches given criteria. So what we want to do here is find the product whose ID matches the ID value in the URL parameter. So what that's going to look like is we're going to say we want to find the product whose ID, so product.id equals, and the way that we access the current value of this URL parameter. Right, the way that we access if the user puts in /products/123, for example, is by saying this.$root.params. And then the name of the URL parameter, which in our case is product ID. So again, if the user went to /product/123, the value of this thing here would be the string 123. And that's how we can find the matching product. So now that we have that product, what we're going to want to do is go up to our template and add some HTML here. So first of all, instead of having this product detail page H1 heading up at the top, we're just going to want to remove that and display the name of the product. So what we're going to do is we're going to say div, class equals image wrap. This is just for styling purposes again, so don't worry too much about that. And inside this div we're going to put the image of our product. So we'll say image. Again, we're going to say source equals product.imageName, right? That's the property name that we want to pass there. And underneath that image. So outside this image wrap div we're going to display the product details by saying div, we'll give this div a class name of product details like so. And inside here is where we're going to put the product's name and price. So we'll just say h1, and then in double curly braces, product.name. And then underneath that we're going to say h3. And the class here is going to be price for styling. Oops, let's add that there. Price. And inside here we're just going to say, double curly braces, product.price. Oh, and one more thing that we're going to add. And this is also going to be inside this product details div, we're going to add a button here that will allow the user to add this item to their cart. So we'll come back and implement that later on once we've added that functionality to our backend. But for now, this button, which is going to have a class name of add to cart, there we go. And the text inside this button is just going to say, add to cart. Alright, so that's all we need to add for this page. Let's save our file and then head over to our other tab. And what we should be able to do now is go to /products and then add in one of the product IDs. And in case you don't know what those IDs look like, you should be able to just open up tempdata.js and look for the ID property on one of these. So 123, 234, etc. And we're going to add that to the end of this URL. So we'll take a look at /products/123. And sure enough, what we'll see is that our basil olive oil comes up with its larger image, its larger title, and its larger price, as well as this add to cart button. And you can also play around with this by putting in other IDs. So we could go to product 345, for example, and we'll see another olive oil come up. So it's a really nice way that we just saw here to allow ourselves to use a single component in Vue to represent multiple pages. Alright, so far we've done our products page and our products detail page. The last page we need to do here is the shopping cart page, which will display a list of all of the items the user has added to their cart. Now, there's not really going to be anything too different about this page. But the main difference is that instead of displaying products from the products array that we had in our temp data, we're going to be displaying products from the user's carts. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is actually add another fake array, right? Well, it's a real array but fake development data that is in this temp data file. And what that's going to look like is we're going to say export const and we'll call this cart items. And then what we're going to do is just make this a simple array. And inside that we can just take some of the items from our products array and copy those. And then we're going to paste them in this cart items array like so, and we can adjust the spacing a little bit to make it look better. And there we go. We now have some items that will be in the user's shopping cart. Alright, so now that we've added that data, let's go back to our shopping cart page and import that array. This will be what we end up displaying up here in our template. So we're going to say import cart items from our temp data file. So, /temp data. And now for our data method in our shopping cart page component, we're going to say return and we're going to add the cart items like so. Okay. So now inside our template we're going to want to use the same v-for directive that we used in our products page to display all of the products on our site to display these cart items. Now we're going to be obviously using a slightly different HTML structure for this. But the same view concepts are going to apply. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the heading to just say shopping cart. You could make it say my cart if you want to, of course. And then under that we're going to say div. And here's where we're going to use that v-for directive. We're going to say v-for and we'll want to display this for each product in our cart items data array, right? So this will repeat this div and everything inside of it for each item in there. And we can insert the data just by referring to this product now. Cool. So in addition to the v-for directive, we're also going to add a class to this div for styling purposes. So we'll say class equals product container. Alright? And we'll also need a key. So after the v-for directive, we're going to say :key. And just like we did in our products page, we're going to use the product ID, right, the ID of the individual product as the unique identifier that Vue can use behind the scenes. And now that we have that div completed inside this div, we can display the different details for each product. So we're going to display a small image for that product as well as the name and price and a button for removing that item from the user's cart that we'll implement later on. So what that's going to look like, we're going to have our image, the class here is going to be product image. Oops. Let's put that inside those double quotes. Product image. And then for the source we're going to say :source equals product.imageName. Okay, so that's the image. After that, we're going to display the product details and we're going to put those inside a div with the class name of details wrap. Alright, details wrap. And inside the div is going to be an h3 heading with the product's name. So we'll say product.name. And then underneath that we're going to say paragraph product.price. And one last thing outside of this details wrap div, we're going to add that button for removing items from the user's cart. And that's going to just be a button with the class name of remove button. And inside that button we're going to put the text remove from cart. Cool. So now that we've added all of that, we should be able to see all of the items in the user's cart. But one more thing that we'll want to add, and this is going to be outside of the product container by the way. 'Cause we're only going to want to display it once on our site. We're going to add a button at the bottom that will allow the user to go to checkout, right? That will allow the user to actually pay for all of the items. Now, this is the part of our site where we're not actually going to implement it, so this button isn't actually going to do anything. But nevertheless, this is something you could add in using something like Stripe or some other payment processing provider. So for now, we'll just add a button. The class for this button is going to be checkout button. And then inside this button we'll just say proceed to checkout. Cool. So at this point, we should be able to take a look at our application, right? We're going to go to our cart by changing the path at the end of our URL here to /cart. And sure enough, we'll see all of the items in our cart along with the name, the image, and the price. And then over to the right hand side here, this remove from cart button. Alright. Now one more thing that we might want to add to this page is when the user doesn't have any items in their cart, which we can simulate by going back to here and just replacing cart items with an empty array, right? If we do that and go back to our page and hit refresh. Now you may see an error in the console here because of the import statement that we left behind, but you can ignore that for now because we aren't going to leave it this way anyway. So what we might want to do is display a message letting the user know that they haven't added anything to their cart yet. So that's actually pretty simple to do. And in order to make that happen we're going to use something called the v-if directive in Vue, right? So we used the v-for directive already to repeat some sort of HTML structure. We can use something called the VIF directive to only display some piece of HTML if some condition is true. Alright, so here's what that's going to look like. Up here above our product container div, we're actually going to add another div that surrounds everything we want be able to show and hide and put the rest of our page content inside of there, including the proceed to checkout button, right? Because obviously we don't want to show that if the user doesn't have any items to buy. Cool. So now that we've done that, what we're going to do is use the VIF directive, and we're going to say that we only want to show all of this if the length of the products, right? So in other words, if the length of our cart items array is greater than 0, and that's what that would look like. So now all of this is only going to be displayed if this is true. And what we can do is display a message if that's not true, which will look like this. We'll say div if cart items.length. And oops, that should be inside some double quotes there. Alright, so if cart items.length is equal to 0, then what we're going to want to do is display the message saying, your cart is empty, or something like that. So we'll just say you currently have no items in your cart. And now if we go back and take a look at our site, well, first let's actually change this cart items to an empty array like so. If we go back to our site now and hit refresh, we should see that sure enough it says you have no items in your cart, and if we go back and just remove that array and save that again, go back and hit refresh, we'll see that all of that is once again displayed. So that's how to implement a basic shopping cart for our site.